Bitcoin has risen more than 100% in the last 2 months, but critics say the digital currency is showing signs of a bubble. In the last week, Bitcoin hit an all-time high, only to slump back down. It's this kind of volatility that gets bears worried, not to mention questions about safety, fraud, lack of government recognition, and competition from other digital currencies. Joining us now to break it all down is Polychain Capital founder and CEO Olaf Carlson-Wee. Polychain is a hedge fund backed by Andreessen Horowitz and Union Square Ventures. Also joining us, our Bloomberg editor-at-large, Corey Johnson. Olaf, I want to start with you. Is there a Bitcoin bubble? What do you think?
Well, we've seen really fast growth in Bitcoin recently. I think this is an uptick coming from an industry that hasn't been moving as aggressively in the public radar. But now that a lot of the growth in the price is more closely tracking the fundamentals, I think we're seeing a big uptick for that reason.
Corey, some investors have told me that Bitcoin is like gold. It is a finite resource and therefore just not as interesting. What's your take?
Well, I think gold's fascinating personally, but it is true that the way Bitcoin is constructed, it's meant to be finite. It's meant to be harder and harder to mint coins as there are more and more out there. And so the scarcity value is an important part of the Bitcoin plan and has been from the very beginning. But I think, you know, for people in the Bitcoin community, they see all this investment, they see all this excitement, they know all these deals, they can't believe their parents don't understand what they're doing. So when they see the price surge, I think it's seen as a validation of what they've all been working on. But there's absolutely an element of gold-like, of gold bug-like, both fervent belief and rabid speculation going on here. And you can see that in the reaction to the price. And you can, I thought you really did see that, you know, when you showed that 5-day chart 5 days ago, when you saw that really dramatic 1 hour 20% sell-off in Bitcoin, you can really see that it is so speculative, this current wild ride that Bitcoin's on, that while the long-term value of Bitcoin may be in the eye of the beholder, the volatility is really in the eye of the speculator.
Now, I've been talking to investors who've said Bitcoin is old news. The new hot cryptocurrency is something called Ethereum. In fact, I interviewed Fred Wilson of Union Square Ventures and asked him for his prediction for the year, and he had this to say about cryptocurrency in general. Take a listen.
I think that Ethereum will bypass, the market cap of Ethereum will bypass the market cap of Bitcoin by the end of the year.
So of all the predictions he could have made about anything in tech, that is what he chose. Olaf, first of all, explain how Bitcoin and Ethereum are different.
Yeah, so Bitcoin has a programming language that you can use to interact with the protocol as a developer. It's a very limited programming language. In Ethereum, this programming language is much more expressive. And it's higher level. What this means is that for developers building applications on top of the protocol, it's actually much easier to work with. So what we've seen in Ethereum is a much richer organic developer ecosystem develop very, very quickly, which is what has driven Ethereum's price growth, which has been actually much more aggressive than Bitcoin.
So would you agree with what Fred had to say?
Yeah, I would agree with Fred.
You think the market cap is going to surpass?
I don't know if I would agree with as aggressive a timeline as Fred, but I think in the long term, absolutely.
How long?
I would give it maybe, I would extend that out 1 year. So maybe by the end of 2018.
Interesting. Corey, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think Ethereum is really interesting, too, in the way that it sort of uses a distributed network to embed both sort of security and ownership of Ethereum, that it's a much more like TCP/IP than it is sort of the client-server method or model. But I think, so it's fascinating from that regard, and therefore could have some really interesting different use cases, still using the general concept of blockchain. But I think that the other problem is that it's harder and harder to use Bitcoin. And one of the big issues that I think not a lot of people are talking about in the Bitcoin world are how hard it is to close a transaction. The speed of closing a transaction in Bitcoin is getting exponentially worse. And it's been happening, interestingly, coinciding with the big rise in the price. But it's just hard to do a deal on Bitcoin right now. We're showing a chart right now that shows how long it takes to get a confirmation on the Bitcoin network of a Bitcoin transaction. And it's getting slower and slower, and that may be a problem that's embedded into the actual coin itself, so that the Bitcoin can't really get out of its own way with this problem. There's been a lot of discussion of this problem for some time, well over a year in the Bitcoin community, but the fixes haven't worked. And the proposed fixes are challenging the very nature of Bitcoin. So unless a solution is found to this, I think that it's going to be a real problem, a wind in the face of Bitcoin's ascendancy, because the transactions, the deals just can't get done.
What about the safety issues here, Olaf? I mean, we just covered this big ransomware WannaCry hack attack, and the hackers were asking for ransom paid in Bitcoin because of the anonymity. Will that change?
Well, I think these technologies basically offer a whole new suite of use cases that weren't possible beforehand. So that includes both good actors and bad, just like the internet itself enabled both good and bad people.
Are there any other cryptocurrencies that we should be watching?
Oh, many others. Would you like to know what they are?
Yes, I would.
So I very much like Ethereum tokens, which are built on top. These are things like Maker, Auger, Golem. I also am a pretty big fan of some of these more novel types of signatures. So this is in things like Zcash or Monero.
When do you think these are going to go mainstream? I mean, when will the average novice consumer be paying for things in Bitcoin or Ethereum tokens, whatever it is?
So I think we're absolutely still in the kind of infrastructure building phase before we're ready for user-facing applications. But I do think within 1 to 2 years, we'll start to see the first viral applications that are user-facing.